Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Down Syndrome Center of Western Pennsylvania podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kishore Vellody. Today, we're going to be discussing behavioral issues in Down syndrome. Now, talking about behavioral management is at the top of the list of the most difficult things I do during a clinic visit. As a father, I know how hard it can be to manage challenging behaviors in your children, especially if your child is exhibiting those behaviors right in front of your family, friends, or doctor. However, with the right mindset, I think we can help our children learn their boundaries and bring their behaviors where they're expected to be. Today, we are specifically going to be focusing on how to use timeout effectively. Timeout is a technique that can be highly effective, but only if it's used correctly and used correctly every time. We'll talk about why timeout may be even more effective for many of the behaviors seen in children with Down syndrome than those behaviors that might be seen in other children. So, how commonly are behavioral issues reported to be seen in children with Down syndrome? It's estimated that significant behavioral problems are present in about 15 to 30% of children with Down syndrome. But I think that's a very high number. It's been my observation that the majority of the behavioral issues that I see in my patients actually have nothing to do with an extra 21st chromosome. There's no gene on that chromosome that causes Johnny to push his sister or Sally to talk back to her mother. I think that with a good understanding for the reason for the behaviors and learning some parental discipline techniques like timeout, many of the behaviors can be managed effectively. Behavioral specialists always say that all behavior is communicative. When Johnny pushes his sister, he is likely not trying to intentionally cause her injury or send her to the hospital. More likely, he is communicating that his sister is bothering him in some way. Maybe she's saying things that annoy him or singing that song from Frozen for the umpteenth time. In that case, Johnny's pushing her is communicating that he does not like those things. Or maybe his sister has been getting all of the parents' attention for getting a good grade on her test, and in that case, Johnny is communicating that he wants some of that attention for himself. So pushing his sister results in all that attention being diverted back to Johnny. And even though the attention is probably negative, it's attention nonetheless. And children always will take any form of attention they can get. The other thing that families tell me is that they have a difficult time disciplining their child with Down syndrome. Many times they tell me that they don't think their child can understand discipline. That's just not the case. Children with Down syndrome have excellent receptive language skills. That means that even while we're waiting on their verbal speech to really take off in those early years, they can understand everything that you are saying to them at an age-appropriate level most of the time. They can also tell when their sibling without Down syndrome gets corrected for doing something, but then they themselves don't get corrected for doing the very same thing. That's a recipe for getting them to have ingrained behaviors that are very hard to fix later on. As parents, the way that we respond to undesired behaviors plays a major role in whether we will continue to see those behaviors again in the future. In an ideal world, our children would do only good and nice things. They would never misbehave. Unfortunately, it's just not that easy. Children are always going to test their limits. The importance of setting clear and consistent limits cannot be emphasized enough. If a child does not feel that there are limits, their behavior will only worsen and never get better. This broad concept of limit setting includes positive praise for desired behaviors and withdrawal of all attention for undesired behaviors. Another way of putting this is time in and time out. They must be used together, and neither is effective on its own in terms of limit setting and behavioral modification. An example of what's called time in is drawing attention when you catch your child doing something good. If you see, Johnny's using his words instead of pushing his sister, that's a great time to let him know he did a great job. Immediate praise and reward is a great way to do time in, but what about when they don't do the desired behavior? That's when you use timeout. Now, many times when I bring up timeout in clinic, I see parents roll their eyes and say that it never works. Maybe you're doing that right now wherever you're listening to this podcast. But when I get more detail on how exactly timeout is being done in that home, many times I find that they are actually reinforcing the behavior that they're trying to get rid of. Essentially, they're doing the exact opposite of their goal. Now, with all the misconceptions of timeout, it's sometimes even better to use a different phrase for what you're now going to be doing moving forward. Maybe calling it something like taking a break, instead of calling it timeout in your home. Well, just to avoid confusion, I'm going to continue to call it timeout for the remainder of this podcast, but you can choose to use whatever phrase you would prefer in your home when doing the exact same concepts. So how is timeout done correctly? Timeout needs to be a complete removal of all attention for a period of time. Before first using the timeout technique, it should be explained to your child at an appropriate developmental level. Tell them that when they do something wrong, they will be told to sit in timeout. You may even want to demonstrate this in a role play type of setup, maybe with one of their dolls or action figures. Pretend that the doll or action figure did something wrong and then put them in timeout. And then, very important is that every person who cares for the child has to be consistent with using the timeout technique. Kids are very smart and can easily play one caregiver against another if only one is doing timeout. That includes grandparents as well. The timeout location must be very boring to your child. There can be no TV, iPads, books, whatever in the timeout area. It's gotta be boring. For that reason, a bedroom is really not a great place for timeout because lots of times the kids have their favorite toys or stuffed animals there that they like to play with. Also, the bedroom is somewhere where they go to sleep, and so it should be an enjoyable location for them, and so using it for discipline is often not the best idea. The best place for timeout is really in an easily accessible location where the child can be seen easily. Maybe a hallway or the corner of the kitchen are good ideas. Timeout should never be used in a scary location like a closet or a dark basement. The purpose is to remove attention from the child, not to scare them. And in the timeout area, you should try to have a chair or a mat or something for the child to sit on. So let's give an example here. Let's say Johnny hits his sister. You start with a very calm and brief statement saying something like, "Johnny, you hit your sister, so go sit in timeout." Or you could say, "Johnny, you hit your sister, so go take a break," whatever you want to say. But don't repeat or expand on the statement. If Johnny doesn't go into timeout within a few seconds, you can give him maybe one more reminder, but don't just keep on reminding him. Because if you keep threatening him with timeout, but don't actually do it until the 5th warning, he's just going to learn that your initial requests really don't mean anything. And if he doesn't go to timeout after that first warning, pick him up, with him facing away from you, and put him gently in the timeout area. Ignore any protest that he might give you that he doesn't want to be there. And after getting him to the timeout area, if he keeps trying to get up, then non-verbally keep him in the area by gently placing your hand on his shoulders. Don't keep talking with him or verbally telling him to keep quiet and such. Many parents fall into the trap of when they hear their child saying, "Mommy, please, I won't do it again," and then the parent responds, "You said that the last time." Then the child continues the conversation, and the next thing you know, there's really not been any time out. In reality, it's really been a great time in kind of reinforcement of the behavior that you didn't want in the first place. You've been giving attention for something that you didn't want them to do in the first place. There should be absolutely no verbal exchange from the initial statement where you tell them to go to timeout until the timeout is completely over. The length of time that your child can stay in timeout is estimated to be about 1 minute for every year of age. I think a 5-minute maximum is a good idea. But since it can be hard to keep track of that time, I would suggest setting an audible timer that the child can hear. The child should be told that timeout does not start until they are quiet and staying in the timeout area. If the child is screaming and yelling or trying to escape at the end of the time limit, you just restart the timer again. Don't verbally explain why you're resetting the timer. Pretty soon, they'll learn to calm themselves down so the timer doesn't keep getting reset. It takes some patience and consistency on the parent's part, but it will work. And when the child is in timeout, it's important for life to go on for the rest of the family members. Don't just stand around the timeout area watching the timer for yourself. The child needs to know that they are really being completely ignored. You might expect some loud protests, and especially in the beginning when you start to ignore them for the first time. And this is actually a really good sign that your child is understanding the concept of timeout. You want them to dislike the separation periods so they don't want to just go back there again. Remember, it should never be scary for the child, just an unwanted time. They don't want to be separated from everybody else. After the timer sounds, the child should not jump out of the chair all by themselves. Rather, they need to wait until they are formally excused from timeout from their parent. The parent should then ask the child to do or correct whatever it was that got them into timeout in the first place. If Sally talked back to her mother when she was asked to pick up the pencil that fell, she should be asked again to pick it up after the timeout is over. And if she does it, then she should be praised. If she doesn't do it, well, the timeout procedure should be done again. And after the second timeout, Sally should again be asked to do the desired behavior. And actually, this brings up kind of a key concept here. In those first few minutes after a timeout, it's really important to keep an eye out for any desired behaviors that your child does. Praise them for anything you catch them doing that's good, no matter how minor. Say things like, "Sally, you really are doing a great job helping your brother clean up today." In order for timeout to work effectively, there has to be many more time-ins than timeouts. In other words, you have to catch them doing something good a lot more often than you catch them doing something that you don't want them to do. Once the concept is learned effectively at home for both parent and child, timeout can really be used in any location. All you need is a quiet corner of a room, and the procedure can be done just as it's done at home. If Johnny's not listening at the grocery store, a quiet area where there's not much shopping traffic can be an excellent place for timeout. Once the children learn that appropriate behavior is expected everywhere, and that timeout is very portable, they'll be learning about their self-control at all those times. I hope you found this brief overview of timeout helpful. We have several handouts on this technique that we'd be happy to share with you if you'd like more information. Just let us know. Please know that you are definitely not alone in any behavioral struggles with your children. Please also know that you can get through this. Remember, very rarely, if ever, is the undesired behavior we see due to the genetics of Down syndrome. More likely, it is just behavior that is seen in any child of that age or developmental stage. Just keep thinking about what your child is trying to communicate through those behaviors. Never ever let them think that they are the ones in charge or calling all the shots. They need to learn to respect not only your authority, but authority figures in general. All children need to learn appropriate behaviors in order to be fully functioning adults, able to participate in society and in the workforce eventually. And if the children learn appropriate behaviors from an early age, their interactions with their coworkers and supervisors will be much easier for them as adults. Listen, I know being a parent is a tough job, and we're happy to help you with any suggestions or resources that we can find. If you feel like you've tried everything, and it just doesn't seem to be working, just let us know, and we can try to get you connected with a behavioral therapist in your area. But first, try these techniques we talked about today, and I hope you can find them helpful. And until next time, enjoy your children, because we all know that they get big too quick, and that's probably the hardest part of being a parent of all. Bye-bye.